The other thing to keep in mind too is when you're doing your research is finding out what happens if the session goes over time. So like if it's a 60-minute reading and it goes 90 minutes, are you going to be charged for the 90 minutes, or is the astrologer just sort of offering that generously? I've had both scenarios where, it goes over time and then I get charged extra, and it was kind of like, oh, wow, I was not expecting that. And then I've had...
That would make me angry.
You know what? It kind of did too for me too, because as the receiver, you're sort of letting the astrologer guide the session. And if they're willing to give an extra 30 minutes, you're kind of thinking they're willing to give an extra 30 minutes. But when then you get hit with the bill for it, it's like, oh, shoot, I guess I should have been thinking this more of like when you talk to like the accountant or the lawyer who is just going to bill you for every minute that you're there. So that's an interesting one too. And I think it's just good to be aware of, so you can ask these questions up front and you don't get blindsided on the back end.
Yeah, because that would make me mad.
It definitely was a shock for me.
Because, when you are receiving an astrology reading, and even though you are interacting and you're asking a lot of questions, you're still on the receiving side. And when you're receiving, you're not thinking about what the clock says. It's kind of like being in a therapist's office. When I'm in therapy, the therapist occasionally has to say, we're out of time. I'm like, really? I didn't even know, what time is it? Because I was in process. And if the therapist says, well, you're like 15 minutes late, that'll be an extra 25% or something, I think I would be horrified. And
exactly. Well, and on the flip side of that, respect the astrologer's time too. Like if you have a reading set for a time, show up at that time, and don't expect if you're late that the whole reading is going to go late. Because a lot of especially the astrologers we work with, they're busy. They're booked. Like sometimes it can take a couple weeks or a month to get in to see them. So
yeah. And as a related corollary, now I know this is human nature and we can't really solve it, but the number of times when you're seeing someone there, especially if it's the first time, and they're feeling you out and you're talking about a lot of different things, and they save the question that's most important to them for the last 5 minutes.
I think I've done that, Donna.
And you're like, okay, I don't want to tell you, give you a flippant answer. And obviously this is really, really important to you. And I don't want to try to think I'm scamming you by saying you have to come back, but you really saved the most important thing for last. And there's not a lot of time to go into this. And it's both amusing and frustrating at the same time. So, but I also understand when you're just getting to know someone, they may not feel comfortable, laying out these really complicated issues when they first walk in the door. So that's another thing to consider. Unless the astrologer is a therapist, you probably aren't going to see them on a week-to-week basis, because that's not what astrology is really set up to do. But if you've got a lot of stuff going on, you might need to see them, 1 or 2 or 3 times in a row to get to all of the things that are really important to you. So that's also something to consider when you are making your plan for what kind of astrological consultation you want to work with. Yeah,
I definitely have wished at times that I could just have astrologers on speed dial. And I kind of do.
Amanda, of all the people in the world, you do have astrologers on speed dial.
I guess that wish got fulfilled. I pretty much do. It's hilarious. But I agree with you. It's not like you go have one reading and then you're done and everything's clear. There's going to be times where you would like some more information, and it's good. Like you live your life and things happen, and then it's like, oh, I got to go back now. I need more information. Plus, it's not always about you. Like I've had readings that are more focused about my children, and I really, I'm going through something with my children. I want to understand them better. So again, so many different angles.
Yeah. I always joke that any chart you can sit down and talk for 8 hours about easily. This gets back to how long is an astrology session? Most of the time they're around an hour. If you get too much less than a half an hour, especially if you don't know someone, unless you're doing single questions, like where's my passport, it's hard to get to the meat of things in less time than that. If they're longer than an hour and a half, 75 minutes to an hour and a half, people's eyes start to glaze over and you reach a point of diminishing returns where you can't process any more information because it's so dense. So think about that when you're booking that, they tend to hover around an hour. But I remember when I first started, I used to, book 2 or 3, they were wanted to do a personal natal reading, and they wanted to do a relationship reading, and they wanted to do a location reading. and they wanted to do them all at once. I'm like, okay, I'll book a 3-hour session, which at the time seemed like a good idea. But, in hindsight, I think that's amusing.
I totally agree with you. Okay. Great tips for those of you starting out too with your practices. All right. I promised that we would go into how to know if an astrologer is not right for you. And we have several things here for you. One of the biggest things for me is if you feel fear every time you talk to them, it's probably not a great fit. Now, this could be you. So with someone speaking as someone with as much Saturn as I have in my chart, I know that my immediate response can be fear. So I have to be careful of if it's coming from me or if it's actually coming from the other person. So think about that. But at the same time, if they're saying things to you that make you fearful or feel powerless or feel, I just said powerless, but disempowered, pay attention to that. That's probably not the right astrologer for you. Donna, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that's probably not the right astrologer for anyone. But let's just be clear. I understand that in the world, there are monsters. And there are monsters for a good reason, because we all need to be able to learn and stretch and grow. And we do so occasionally by confronting monsters. I remember when I was at an astrology conference, so maybe 12, 13 years ago or something. And I was very new to this concept of astrology conferences, and to be surrounded by all these astrologers, like, wow, and this is kind of cool. And unfortunately, at the time, I had been in a car accident like a week and a half before the conference, and I had broken my hand into little itty bitty pieces. So I went to a conference with a cast on, which, okay, first of all, started out like all kinds of interesting things of astrologers giving their theories without even seeing my chart of why I had broken my hand, which was entertaining in and of itself. But I was sitting down at a table in the corner with my computer, and I was looking at my screen, and some astrologer who had been certified by one of the organizations came up, and it was the chart for my daughter. And she's leaning over my shoulder, and she started talking to me about my daughter and saying that, oh, it was a shame that my daughter was an only child because she really needed to have siblings. Oh, did I know that my husband was going to move us across the country? And she just started spouting out all this stuff. And the more she talked, the more horrified I was, because A, I didn't ask for her opinion. B, I didn't like anything that she was saying. And C, it was all about this fated stuff that I had no choice in. And then I started getting angry. And so, even if the astrologer isn't telling you you're going to have a terrible life and Pluto's doing this evil thing to you, astrologers can get so caught up in what they think they know about astrology that they're not listening to you. And if they're not listening to you, how are they? It's about them. It's not about you. And as the person hiring the astrologer, you should know, and hopefully the astrologer should know too, that it's their responsibility and their duty to help you through your process. When you see the astrologer, you are the hero on the quest. The astrologer is the guide. The astrologer is not the hero, and you are some thing that they meet along the way. You are the hero. And I know Amanda knows what I'm saying when I say this, because it's something that we talk about in all kinds of other contexts of being the hero on your own journey. But it's especially important for you to remember this and, walk away from an astrologer who doesn't understand.
Yeah, it's not right. You're not there to be told some predictions that make you fearful about living your life. And if that's happening, then yeah, like Donna said, it's not the right fit. And like she said, it's probably not the right fit for anybody. Also, if they make really definitive statements like you would never be a good astrologer, it's not in your chart, or you will never find satisfying love, or you have a really difficult chart, Pluto is making you blank. Any statements like that are just like taking the information that's in the chart and making it so solid, like one perspective or one lens. There's so many different ways to look at everything that astrologer is literally projecting what they think that means about you. And you do not have to take that on. And again, it's like what I said earlier in the beginning, it's hard to unhear something. This is why the selection process is so important. And we've had, we recently interviewed some Inner Circle members, and Inner Circle member Natalie came on, and she was starting to get interested and maybe she could be an astrologer, and she was getting excited about that. And then an astrologer looked at her chart and was like, no, you could never be an astrologer. You're not wired for it. It's like, oh, it took her a year to recover from that. And that's a year she could have been like practicing her craft and honing it. And now she is practicing astrology and she loves it. And people are learning so much from her. So
I'm going to be sputtering with annoyance at this point. I just had a client last week, and she told me she had several astrologer friends look at her chart and say, oh, you have, Pluto is conjunct the sun in the 8th house and you must have a terrible life. And she just went on. And I was like, wow, that's really hard. Can I ask, what made you actually reach out to me? Because you had these terrible experiences with astrologers. I would think you'd never want to speak to an astrologer again. And she said, no, I had a friend who told me that, she'd heard you on the radio and that she thought she would, that we would really click. And I said, well, what do you think about your life? And she says, I love my life. My life is so amazing. And she started talking about all these stories. And then I had to say, well, between your own experience of having an amazing life and this person who told you because of this, and this in a chart that you would have a terrible life, which are you going to believe? Because you're having an amazing life. So maybe the astrologer is incorrect or isn't looking at all the pieces, or perhaps the way they learned astrology isn't necessarily the only way to look at the equation or any of these other things. But I had to talk through it out loud for myself because it was the only way I could keep myself from getting really, really angry on her behalf. And, sometimes I feel like one of the reasons I'm so passionately devoted to teaching astrology students is to prevent as many people from doing that to their clients as I possibly can, because there's no reason to put that kind of pressure, to put your own worldview on people that you are here to hopefully reduce the suffering of the world with this amazing gift we've been given.
With great power comes great responsibility. I have this friend who, when his daughter was born, someone did a chart reading for his daughter, and it was so negative about this baby, this little infant, just born. Literally, like she was going to have no friends, no social life. She was going to have a really hard life, period. Like it was just going to be a hard life. And so he walked away like writing off astrology altogether. Like, and actually, I feel like he walked away with a lot of fear about astrology and wouldn't really revisit it again because it had been so negative and just nothing redeeming. How is that helpful for a parent to hear?
How is that being a good human? I mean, seriously, would you go up and say those kinds of things to people if astrology wasn't in the equation? And what makes you think astrology gives you permission to even say those kinds of things? It's very disturbing.
It is disturbing. Yeah. So you guys, if you've had that experience, it's not right. And it's okay for you to feel upset about it. It's okay for you to feel angry about it. And again, remembering that you are your own authority. At the end of the day, you are your own authority. If something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't sit right, if something doesn't look right or smell right or feel right, it's not right for you. You don't have to judge the person. It doesn't mean that person's evil. It's just not right for you. So yeah, I mean, we've Donna and I have heard many, many, many horror stories. We recently received an email from a community member saying, I've just basically surrendered to the fact that my life is always going to be horrible. I've been to several astrologers. They said basically my lot in life is to learn how to deal with the fact that I'll never be happy. It's like, whoa, really? So again, that is just not the responsible or empowered use of astrology. So you don't have to put up with it. If someone's going in that direction in a reading, you can leave. You don't have to sit there. And hopefully they have a money back guarantee like Donna does. Okay, some other things to know if they're not right for you. Why don't you take a few, Donna, here?
Talk about horror stories. Okay, so if an astrologer is hitting on you, that's probably a bad sign. And I say this because astrology is truly an incredibly powerful tool. And astrologer who's good at what they do and has a modicum of intuition will get very intimate on the details of your life very quickly. And, for anyone who's in a place that's at all, dealing with relationship issues or intimacy issues, that can be a potent thing, to feel like somebody's so in tune with you that you take it personally. So there's two sides to this equation. There's the person who gets a crush very quickly on their astrologer, but there's also the astrologer who gets off on it. And I know I've heard of one astrologer who's gone through like 5 wives and 3 of them were clients. And I find that just as creepy as a therapist who is hitting on their clients. And they have to, they can go to jail for doing that. Astrology is not regulated. So just be careful. An astrologer should hopefully have some appropriate boundaries and should not be mixing, astrology and professional clients and relationship issues. That doesn't sound like a good plan to me. And it's different if it's among friends, but it's not when there's money changing hands.
And so true. I mean, so many people go to the astrologer when they're in that vulnerable place, and to have someone see you in a way that like even the people closest to you don't, your lover doesn't, your spouse doesn't, your children don't. And here's this stranger like able to verbalize parts of you that nobody else knows. That is where misuse of power can come in easily. And it's just, it's the same with any positions of authority. We're seeing it in the churches with the priests. We're seeing it, in the government. We're seeing it. It's like when there's that level of authority and when we're giving our power away to it, things can happen. So, yeah.
Astrology is a powerful tool. It gives us insight into the human psyche and how you're wired. And someone who isn't coming from an ethical place can use that as a way to disempower you on purpose. They can use it as a way to talk you into things that you might not have thought about on your own. They can use it as a tool for saying things like, all the scams that psychics come up with. Like, oh, there's a curse on you, but if you pay me $5,000, I can take it off of you. And that's illegal. That the FBI has fraud alerts out for this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that astrologers will do that per se, but I do know astrologers who have sat down in, astrology conferences and counseled people setting up their businesses that, hey, well, if you want to make money at this, you have to keep them coming back. So, say, hey, you can come back for this, you can come back for that, you can come back for this other thing. And all of a sudden, it's more about the astrologer making money than helping you. And it's a fine line with using astrology, and paying astrologers, a living wage and having it become something else.
Interesting. Yeah. So lots of food for thought, you guys. What are some other things to look for, like red flags, I guess?
One of my least favorite red flags is, you hear, I heard an astrologer on Facebook once say, actually, when I speak during a session, I do not want the client to say anything. They must be silent the entire time while I reveal my wisdom. And I'm like, all of my hackles go up because, as you said in the beginning, this is the astrologer being the guru and not being the guide. And I suppose that, for some people in their process, when they're in flow, they don't want to be interrupted. But I personally encourage my clients to ask as many questions as they want because they're going to get better answers if they're asking questions. And I consider it a conversation. And it helps them to take their power by helping them steer the conversation to what's truly important to them. So the thought of there being astrologers who do not want their clients to speak because they believe that what they're saying is so very important that their clients should just shut up and take it all in disturbs me.
Interesting. I haven't had that experience. Like my experience has been more astrologers are. I sometimes I tend to want to be quiet just to not influence them. That's funny. This is what I did in the beginning. Like it was more when I was like really skeptical. So I was like, well, I just won't say anything and see how accurate they are. See how much they know without my input,
And yes, there's the testing that goes on. There's different kinds of clients that come to you. I think it's really funny. There are clients that come because they're in crisis. Something's and their main question is, when is it going to stop? And so you have to work with those kinds of clients one way. There are clients that are just curious and, or someone gave them a gift certificate and they've always wanted to have a reading. And so they show up and they want to know a little bit of everything. There are clients who are students of astrology and they've never had a reading before, or they've had several and they want to see how different astrologers are handling the situation. There are clients who have very specific questions, like they're setting up a business and they want to know what's the right day to incorporate, or they're getting married and they want to pick an auspicious wedding date, those kinds of things. And then there are people who are on a really passionate quest for self-development. They know something is changing. They don't quite know what it is, and they're like looking for words to describe it. But they're usually seeing a whole bunch of other different practitioners simultaneously. And the whole range, which makes it fascinating. But it also means, as the astrologer, you have to learn how to adapt to all of these different ways of being, including the ones who, well, generally speaking, the more you charge, the less likely you're going to get to have the people who are just testing you out. Although it does happen.
Yes, I was one of those. I think at this point we've laid out 5 different steps for you to take. You can download the list of astrologers plus this step-by-step guide so that it's kind of like a checklist. You can go through your checklist and choose the right astrologer for you. And really, this is coming from a place of wanting for you to have a great experience with astrology, for you to have it be something that it's been for us. It's been empowering and inspiring and uplifting. And yes, we've had the opposite experiences, but I feel like those happened to me far enough in where I was able to screen them. And actually, Natasha, the one I had my first reading with, who is now one of my soul sisters on this planet, there's been times where I've had readings with other people and then I'll tell them what she said and she's like, oh, that's not right. Oh no, you can't do that. So I was able to bounce it off her, and she's Russian, so she speaks with this awesome accent. But she would just be like, that's not right. They can't say that to you. And she would feel real protective. So I feel real protective of you, all of you out there. And I know Donna does too. We want you to have a good experience. At the end of the day, trust your intuition, trust that part in you who knows what's right. And we've just also wanted to mention, for those of you who want to be able to do it yourself, you don't want to rely on other people's interpretations. You'd like to be able to do it yourself. We are going to be opening up enrollment for Donna's class, Decode Your Cosmic Blueprint, which is our basic foundational astrology chart reading course. That's going to be open up here soon. But in the meantime, enjoy. I think it's so fun to play around with different types of astrology, different astrologers, but I always come back to my tried and true and trusted ones over and over, because when you find a good one for you, it's like, okay, that's my girl, or that's my guy. And then it does become like a relationship. They know you, they know your life, they know your children, they know your family, they know what you're going through.
Yeah, I want to echo that. There's no one right astrology. But there's a range. And I think having several different astrologers help you through things is usually helpful, because each one brings something different to the table and helps you see things in a slightly different way. But it's a small range. And there are ones that'll be outside that. And then, you're like, no. I mean, I'm with Natasha there. You get to a point where you're like, that, no. And I think that comes down to, there's some things that you just can't know. And there are some things that are downright harmful to say. And that's the astrologer's bias about the way they see the world being projected onto you, rather than holding space for you to develop your own way of seeing the world. And so I think that when your hackles go up and your protective side goes up, as Amanda just said, it's an indicator that your own precious way of seeing the world is being infringed upon. And the more you honor that, the better off you're going to be.
I like that. Infringed upon. Important to remember those words. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Donna, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. What I love is that you are able to bring both the perspective of the person receiving the reading, but then also the perspective of the astrologer, which is important as we go around and we request readings and we're working with astrologers. It's great for us to be great clients too.
Well, this is something we should probably say before we leave. If you are an astrologer and you're giving readings for other people, it's really important to know that you are on your own journey in this as well, in the sense that the more work you do on yourself, the better you're going to be able to respond to people when they come to you. And so I mentioned my therapist. I have been in therapy on and off most of my adult life in some form or another. And all of those sessions and all that processing I do on my own makes it easier and better and more powerful and gives me the ability to be more present to the people that I'm working with on a whole different level. And all of the astrologers that I respect are also doing a lot of work on themselves in order to be better guides for the people that they work with. And so that's something to consider as you go through your astrological process. You don't get to a place where you get to know everything and dispense wisdom, back to the guru phenomenon. You are a companion to others who are taking their own heroic journeys. And the more you process through your own material, the better off you're going to be able to help others do the same.
Very good. Very important for anybody in the field of healing or guiding, really, any sort of guidance. Absolutely true. It's also worth mentioning that we do not receive a commission or any sort of cut of the reading from the astrologers that are on our list. These are just astrologers that we've worked with. Either they were inner circle guides, or they've helped us teach a course, or they've been associated with Astrology Hub in some way, shape, or form. The agreement between you and that astrologer is completely between you and that astrologer. It has nothing to do with Astrology Hub. We do not receive any financial compensation for the reading. And also, there's no guarantee that because they're on the list, you're going to love the reading. So I just wanted to mention those things. We just put that list together really just to be a great starting point for you. But of course, look in your local area. I mean, I go to the grocery store and there's like astrologers' business cards and things. And it depends on where you live. I do live on Maui. I know that's not normal everywhere, but finding that astrologer, you can use a lot of the other steps that we listed out today to screen and really, again, find that great resonance with an amazing astrologer. And then when you do find those astrologers, it's so awesome. I mean, the amount of insight, and it's just like, it becomes like a magical, co-creative, alchemical experience. And it's extremely empowering and magical just to be able to experience that magic in your life and have a place you can go where you can trust to bounce things off that are happening. So hope that you enjoyed this episode. Donna, thank you again for joining us. I love doing episodes with you. You are just an incredible, sound, grounded, experienced guide.
Virgo.
That we love. So thank you very much. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you found this episode useful and insightful, and that you're even more excited now to have your next astrology reading. I'm excited for you too. Remember to download your free guide. The link is astrologyhub.com/astrologers, or you can find this link in the show notes. And please join us next week. On Monday, we'll be exploring the theme for the week, plus giving you your day-by-day astrological takeaways for the entire week. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you'll get notified as soon as we post new episodes. And as always, we truly appreciate all of you who have rated and reviewed the show. This helps us get the wisdom of astrology out to more and more people and makes you an integral part of the astrological resurgence and renaissance happening today. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us, for being a part of our community, and for making astrology a part of your life. I'll catch you on the next episode. Are you ready to learn more about astrology, take your work with the moon cycles to the next level, and experience what it feels like to be supported by a thriving community of like-minded and like-hearted souls? Then we have the place for you. Join Astrology Hub's Inner Circle, a global community dedicated to spiritual growth, lunar forecasts, and mastery classes with leading astrologers. Simply go to astrologyhub.com/inner circle to learn more and join us today. Reconnect with your childlike wonder of the universe and rediscover your place and purpose in it all. Join our Inner Circle today. Visit astrologyhub.com/inner circle and get in our Inner Circle today.
Hi, this is Chris Kaplan, the producer of the Astrology Hub Podcast. This episode is over, but check the show notes for links to products and services you've heard about during this episode. And if you enjoyed our show, please subscribe and rate using the subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcasts.